The class stood cautiously, tails flitting about nervously and ears moving around to catch any odd noise as they waited for instruction from their teachers. Mr. Maru, their slightly insane chemistry teacher, as well as his wife, Mrs. Maru, their slightly more crazy English teacher, were very, very carefully handling a number of strange objects and unusual devices. From odd spheres with strange levers to long sticks with bright colors, and some objects that the students did recognize as fireworks rockets. Mr. Maru also served as the school's substitute gym teacher, so was smart as a tack but built like a tank. His appearance was always intimidating, but Mrs. Maru was a dainty, sweet creature with a bubbly voice. Some girls idly wondered how these two polar opposites got along well enough to marry. Each girl here had the same body type, human but with cat ears, a tail, patches of short fluffy fur in places, and stark cat eyes. You would mistake them for cosplayers at a convention if you didn't know the history behind them. This was also one of the first ever all-beastkin classes too. Each girl had a different fur pattern, similar to common earth cats like calico, coon, and shorthair. Okay then, ladies, welcome to your extracurricular activities class. You will earn extra credit towards your class grades and also have a bit of fun too. Mr. Maru spoke loudly to the crowd of 25 cat girls, still fresh from the academy and still juniors. Most of the girls perked up, with some of them still terrified of their new hosts, but knew better than to question their teachers. The only non-cat girl in the audience was a dark elven woman who stood quietly nearby, acting as a chaperone for the class. Tails nervously wrapped around legs or waistlines, with some girls having their tails intertwined with their friends or trusted partners. They knew their teachers would never willingly put them in danger, but the objects on the table in front of them made them nervous. Before we begin, ladies, everyone, and I mean everyone, has to put these headphones on. These are ear protectors. We made sure to get some made specially for all of you. Now come on, quickly now. Put them on and do not take them off until we tell you to. Mrs. Maru bellowed, presenting a set of headphones made specially for them. Each student obeyed immediately and put the set of headphones on. The cat ear motif each set had was more than just decoration, as it turned out, and actually fit each girl's ears perfectly. Even the elven woman came over and put on her respective set of noise protectors, then returned to her position nearby. Today is going to be a short lesson on the identification, use, and safe disposal of explosives, Mrs. Maru said excitedly. The crowd gasped in shock. Explosives? Bombs? Is that what all those objects were? Don't be scared. Everyone has to do this. All the elves, beastmen, and other classmates, especially the other humans, had to do it too. And don't worry, almost everything here is just for show. Now, first question. Who can tell me what an explosive is? Mr. Maru asked. The girls stood nervously for a minute before one student finally raised a hand. It's like a chemical reaction, right? Correct. Not quite as much detail as I wanted, but close enough. An explosive is a chemical reaction which releases a large amount of energy in a short time. This, he said, and picked up an odd pineapple-looking object, is called a grenade, and this, he said, picking up a block of wood, is a block of wood. What, if any, is the correlation here? He asked. They all looked at each other. One of the smarter students raised a hand. They have energy? Yes. Well done. It's all the same. Principle. Wood releases its energy when it burns, but it does so very slowly. This grenade releases its energy very, very fast. If you collected a bunch of these logs and made them release their energy very, very fast, you would have a grenade. An explosion is simply a release of energy, same as burning a pile of wood, only very, very fast. He said, alternating between showing off a nearby pile of wood and brandishing the grenade. He used some kind of mechanism that split the grenade in half, showing off its innards. He beckoned the girls to come closer to take a look at its insides, and they did eventually. This is a fragmentation grenade. Looking at its insides, how do you think it works? Fragment? Like, make lots of pieces? Like a window shattering? One girl asked. Correct. The fragmentation grenade has a slightly thicker shell that contains the explosive. The purpose is to shatter the casing so the fragments of the grenade do most of the damage when it explodes, hence the name frag grenade. Yes, it is indeed as nasty as it sounds. Now observe, Mr. Maru said. He moved to a nearby box and procured another grenade. Fire in the hole! He yelled out and then pulled the pin on the device. With the practiced hand of a football star, he tossed the thing into the sandpit nearby. The explosion was small but pronounced. The students were not expecting the detonation and subsequent puff of sand and dust as a result. The crater had become ever so slightly larger as a result, and their cat eyes could clearly see the pockmarked mini-craters made by the shrapnel. The whole situation suddenly made them all very, very nervous as ears suddenly laid flat and tails nervously wrapped around waists. The terror of the situation really overtook them when they suddenly noticed that the world in front of them had fractured reality and now had what appeared to be shattered glass on it. And this, Mr. Maru said as he pointed towards the apparent broken glass in front of them, is why we have a ballistic shield. You genuinely don't have to worry. We aren't stupid. So there, ladies, is your first lesson when it comes to explosives of any kind, from military-grade demolitions charges to common household fireworks. Safety is an absolute that is non-negotiable, Mr. Maru bellowed, loudly to make sure everyone heard. The students just shivered in response and nodded slowly. Mrs. Maru took the stage now and lifted a sheet off of a table. The table contained various devices, common household fireworks, military C4 charges, and various ancient or current day things like shells, grenades, rockets, and other stuff. All of it was, of course, fake, made of plastic or aluminium, and made into cutaways and cross-sections so one could see its innards. Some looked less like explosives and more like very big bullets. Now, a very important question. Why exactly are we here, learning about things that go boom? Why exactly is this exercise a part of your school curriculum? She asked. The students glanced at each other, still in their defensive postures with ears back and tails wrapped. Eventually, one girl, a tabby named Kimberly, finally spoke up. Is like a history lesson or something? Well, yes, but more than that. It's for a number of reasons, but the three main ones are simple: history, safety, and fun. The history part is simple. We humans, shortly before we encountered your world, were actively engaged in a number of wars, military exercises, weapons tests, and technology tests. As a consequence, we have left a fair bit of unexploded ordnance almost everywhere. This is where the safety part comes in. How to identify certain munitions, and how to make sure when you call authorities, you can effectively tell them what they are dealing with. And then, they can use that information to fix the problem fast, safely, and effectively. She calmly explained. All the students collectively made an "oh" of sudden realization, and some even relaxed slightly. Some of them, at least. The prospect of so many bombs lying around scared most girls still. The concept of humans so busily engaged in such dangerous activity, more so. But curiosity eventually overcame their caution, and they approached the table to look at all the bombs. Artillery shells, fragmentation bombs, landmines, mining dynamite, coring charges, tank shells, rockets of all types, and commonly used grenades, including my personal favorite, the thermite grenade. Now, looking at this thing, who can tell me how it works? Mrs. Maru asked her students. She brandished the mock-up variant of a thermite grenade, a large stick with a thick cylindrical head covered in spikes. The girls each took some time to study the device, taking it and examining the cutaway. One girl, a calico called Amari, spoke up. I don't remember what thermite is, but this thing here, she pointed to a ring on the underside of the handle, is the pin. If I read this correctly, this thing is also magnetic, so it sticks to metal surfaces, so presumably you pull the pin, yeet it at what you want to go boom, it sticks, and then boom. Excellent, but not quite boom. Thermite, you see, is a different kind of beast used primarily against tanks or armored targets, that's true. But this doesn't boom, it goes melt, she replied with a strangely frightening smirk. How? It is a complicated but extremely effective chemical reaction. Thermite is a mixture of finely powdered aluminium and iron oxide that produces a very high temperature on combustion, used in welding and for incendiary bombs. Essentially, it's a fire grenade used against tanks. It produces such stupidly high temperatures, it melts through armor plating. A good or lucky throw, and this thing can melt through the plating on a tank right above the ammo storage. Then comes the boom, Mrs. Maru said with a chuckle. Meep! Several girls said at once, echoing the sentiment of fear. They had no time to consider anything, however. The lesson continued as Mrs. Maru held aloft a small cannonball, one of the ancient ones. This one, however, the girls were actually familiar with. Considering the world you came from, you probably know what this is. Cannonball. This particular unit is an explosive. A hollow shell filled with gunpowder. The students all glanced at each other and a look of confusion overcame them. Wait, you have cannons? I thought you just had those big laser things, one girl asked. All three adults laughed at that statement. Of course we have a cannon. Giant starship laser guns are simply another version of a cannon, only very, very fancy. If given enough time, your world may have developed these guns too, you know. It's all about finding an edge above your competition or opponent. Mrs. Maru said, think about it. You have a cannon, right? Guy who's using it is like, I wonder how I can make this shoot faster. Then he figures out how to pre-package gunpowder sacks that can just be shoved in. No measuring, no correcting. Sack in, ball in, boom. Then the guy thinks, well that's good, but how can I make it fire further? This leads to smaller, stronger cannons with longer barrels that hold pressure for slightly longer and therefore yeet the shell further. It's all just about getting better. Eventually you would have gone from this to this, Mr. Maru said as he held up a cannonball, then an artillery shell. One girl raised a hand. How long did it take you to get from cannonball to artillery shell? Oh, several centuries. We were using artillery. The first recorded use of gunpowder mortars was in the 14th century. For reference's sake, it is currently the 25th century. The concept of the shell, the first true explosive shells were used in the late 17th century, but they became more common in the 19th century, particularly during the Napoleonic Wars, 1803 to 1815. The development of reliable fuses allowed these shells to detonate at the desired moment, increasing their effectiveness. The concept of this big bullet thing, a brass casing plus an explosive tip, arrived roughly around the late 19th century. It came to first full-scale use during the First World War in the 20th century. Mr. Maru said, gesturing to various devices on the table display. One girl, the oldest of the group who had the fur pattern similar to a Maine Coon, raised her hand. So does that mean if the cataclysm didn't happen, we would have been able to have those big laser cannon things too? Eventually, yes. Magic doesn't have nearly the same effectiveness in space, so you likely would have had to go a similar route to us. But you don't need to speculate too much because that is already happening. In any case, on with the lesson. Someone asked about thermite. Would you like a demonstration? Mr. Maru said, again making the students uncomfortable with that strange smirk. The students once again nervously glanced at each other. Excellent. Get behind the ballistic glass and stay there, no exceptions. Mr. Maru moved away and retrieved a secured metal box from nearby, as well as a bag of popcorn and 2 empty plant pots. He used a sort of metal pole and hoop system hanging, one pot above the other. He filled the top pot with an odd, very fine powdered gray substance and the bottom pot with popcorn kernels. He also put in the lower pot, an odd, brightly colored cylinder of some kind, buried under the popcorn. He messed around with the top pot for a bit longer, placing some other things they couldn't identify in the top pot, then lit a fuse. Fire in the hole! He bellowed loudly, then ran for cover as the fuse burned. The fuse hit the powder, and a huge, billowing flame suddenly appeared, as well as a strange, loud, hissing, fizzing noise as the powder caught on fire. Within seconds, the pot was in full blaze, the temperature so hot, so viciously hot, that it was starting to melt the ceramic pot. The smoke from it billowed out, an angry cloud of black and gray, filling the air with the smell of rust. Then the pot burned through. A sudden flow of what appeared to be sparking, flaming molten lava came out of the bottom of the top pot. A mixture of spontaneous popping noises, along with the stench of burning popcorn, flooded the air. The mix of smoke became worse, stronger, as the concoction burned. The popcorn mostly just caught fire, but distinct popping noises could be heard. Then, the bottom pot exploded, spreading popcorn kernels and thermite solution everywhere in a fiery, smoky display of boom. Pieces of burned, popped, or singed popcorn flew everywhere, and pockets of still-burning thermite scattered around. The students now realized exactly why the ballistic shield was put there, and they carefully huddled around it. They also now knew exactly why the pots were placed 100 feet away, and why they had to squint a bit to see what was happening. The fizzing and popping eventually stopped, and Mr. Maru walked into the area with a level of caution the girls never knew he had. If he was this careful, then they knew something was up. He stopped, listened a second or two, then hurried back behind the glass. He waited for another minute or so, then returned and headed to the pot, still cautious. He looked around, brandishing a small fire extinguisher with him, and smiled as he turned to the crowd, giving a thumbs up. "Right, it's safe. Go on. Go there." Mrs. Maru commanded and directed the students to go to where he was. They all gingerly wandered towards him, carefully avoiding the smoldering remnants of popcorn and melted metal. They went forward and looked into the pot as per Mr. Maru's direction. They all gasped in shock. The bottom of the pot wasn't ceramic, but rather some kind of solid metal cylinder was put at the bottom. There was a hole straight through it. The thermite had melted straight through the metal, and this, ladies, is thermite, which is also why you are not allowed to use it, or even have any of it, without a special pyrotechnics license. Now you get why the thermite grenade is a piece of banned military equipment. It's rather awful, isn't it? He said. The students all nodded, shivering from the event, and slowly filtered back towards the ballistic glass. Mrs. Maru spoke up. "Right. You now have history. You now have safety. Now for the most important part, fun. How is any of this?" "Fun?" one girl squealed. "Safe-cracking and fireworks, of course," she yelled excitedly. She lifted a tarp covering a large cubic object, and indeed, it was a safe. It was an old one, but still in pristine condition. "So this is how it works. You girls are going to read this textbook here," Mr. Maru said as he rounded the corner and handed them a small booklet. "And you are going to use the knowledge from it to safely break the door on this safe." Mrs. Maru spoke before anyone could ask why. "Why are we doing this, you ask? Simple. This will teach you how much explosives are dangerous, what explosives to avoid, what not to do, and what to actually do. It will help identify unauthorized devices, among many other things, but most of all, career path," Mrs. Maru said. The girls' ears all perked up at once. They heard the magic word, career. This exercise opens you up to a huge multitude of possible career options. Mixing gunpowder is basically chemistry. That's cosmetics, fuel production, oil refining, toy making, even a track towards my personal favorite, chocolate making. And let's not forget the concept of organization. You make proper measurements and make the mathematical calculations correctly, you'll be fast-tracked to other industries, as math is a critical component of a huge number of industries. Anybody here want to fly a plane one day? Well, this will give you extra credit towards your math score. Math is critical to acquiring a pilot's license, Mr. Maru explained. The girls' eyes sparkled. Suddenly they understood what all this loud, boomy nonsense was about. And finally, this will give you the chance to learn how to have a bit of stupid fun on your days off, without any risk of blown limbs, scorched fur, or anything. It isn't just a lesson, it's a fun lesson. Now, I don't want your teachers to know, but I put a special surprise in the lockbox that's locked in the safe. There's one for each of you, and if you get the safe open, they're all yours, Mrs. Maru said with a wink. "Babe?" "What have you been up to?" Mr. Maru asked, giving his wife a side glance. "Don't worry about it, hun. It's all above board. Now, please carry on," Mrs. Maru said, giving her husband a very knowing wink and smile, a combination that all the girls easily recognized from watching interactions between their own parents. Mr. Maru continued with the lesson. The girls read through the textbook, carefully considering everything. They were made to not use calculators and to turn their phones off doing the calculations using paper and pencil. One girl, however, had concerns. She raised her hand, a cute British short hair with a pink butterfly pin in her hair. Isn't this kind of illegal? You are teaching us how to break a safe open after all. Nah. This safe is a 19th century replica. The safes we have these days are so much better than this one. A little boom boom is not going to do much to a modern master key ultralock safe. This is carbon steel. Modern safes are military-grade titanium. Besides, availability of explosives and modern crime techniques, you won't have the chance anyway. This is more for fun, Mrs. Maru replied. The student shrugged and carried on. Mr. Maru answered any questions they had as they carefully inspected the booklet. Mr. Maru then handed them a table full of the raw ingredients to make the necessary gunpowder and made them calculate everything needed to get the mixture correct. Mr. Maru had to intervene only once, when too much sulfur was added to the mixture. He removed it and disposed of it properly before allowing them to continue. Eventually, they made the proper mixture needed, and Mrs. Maru checked their notes and calculations like she was supposed to. Everything was to standard. Mr. Maru then took a small spoonful of the concoction they made and tested it. It was indeed a proper mixture and ready for use. Mr. Maru showed the students how to wrap a measurement of gunpowder and set a fuse in it to create a grenade of sorts. He was more experienced, so for him, it was flawless. The fuses used were also more advanced than previous generations, using a small wire and hand spark generator with a safety catch for the detonator. Mr. Maru moved the hefty safe to a safe distance. He was the one who did the arming and placing, rather than any of the students for obvious reasons, following their instructions to actually place it. Their first attempt was to use a piece of duct tape to hold it up by a string, placing the explosive next to a door hinge. Mr. Maru took his time and did everything properly. Then once he was secure and everything was done correctly, he doubled, tripled, then rechecked his setup, then moved behind the glass. He checked the wire, the fuse, and spark generator, then once satisfied, handed it to one of the girls. Mr. Maru, how exactly do you know how to do this? One girl asked. Former SMC Navy bomb squad technician. I wasn't always a teacher, he said with a smile and readied the explosive. Okay, how did... Oh, fire in the hole, she bellowed, then looked at him. Right! Absolutely correct. Well done. Glad to see you're paying attention. He replied with a smile. She followed instructions and released the safety mechanism, then pulled the trigger. A small electrical generator caused an electric current to charge down the wire towards two opposing ends inside the gunpowder charge, completing a circuit. The resulting spark caused the gunpowder to ignite and explode. The bomb made a loud bang, a puff of smoke, and mixed the sound in with the noise of a hollow metallic clang as the safe moved slightly from the detonation. Mr. Maru held a ballistic shield in front of him as he approached the safe, holding it, at an angle as he made his way close. He took a good look at it and yelled back, "Safe to go! The safe's open!" The girls all rushed in and took a look at the safe. The door hinges had been blown open and the door was barely hanging onto it. Mr. Maru carefully peeled the safe door open and took out the lockbox. He handed it to the victorious students and they excitedly opened it. For all 25 students, paid for by the school's donors, for each girl was a shopping voucher at a nearby mall for the equivalent of $500. They all celebrated happily and jumped for joy at the sight. The elven woman from earlier approached and cleared her throat. The noise caused every girl to suddenly snap to attention and look at her. Now, ladies, I know this is something you have to be excited about, but we made this arrangement only on the condition you use that money for school supplies, textbooks, and replacement uniforms for school. Once all these items are procured, you'll have roughly $100 to spend on yourself. But please, ladies, school supplies first and foremost, are we clear? She said. Yes, Headmistress Cleary, the girls all said together. Fantastic. This has been a most enlightening experience. Can I count on you two to take them to the mall on their day? Off tomorrow? She asked, gesturing to the other two adults. Sure, I'm up for it, he replied. Excellent. Now, I'll count on you two to clean this up. I'll take these two back to the school and wrap up for the day. Back on the bus, ladies. Make sure you secure your vouchers properly in your backpacks. I'll put them in a lockbox when we get to school and keep them safe for tomorrow. Off you go, then, Mrs. Cleary said, and each girl giggled happily as they all filed into the school bus. This was enlightening. Do you two think this can be done more often for other classes? She asked. It's kind of pricey to do this, safe and explosives and thermite, but I guess I can see if I can organize the supplies once a month, Mr. Maru said. Maybe I can ask some of my old Navy buddies to help out. Works for me. See you two tomorrow morning, Mrs. Cleary said with a smile and got on the bus. Enjoy next story. The class stood quiet as their professor fiddled with the imposing hulk of man-shaped metal in the middle of nowhere. It looked like a thing they had seen in news feeds and the extremely few internet videos they were able to see. But that was nothing compared to the much bigger one off to the left. The girls all stood to attention, a class of 20 high school seniors, a mixture of elves of all kinds, including 2 half-elven orcs. Watching closely from the sidelines, still holding her morning coffee, was the school dean, also an elf. Their teacher was a human named Andrew. They were all surprised to see him walking around because normally he was in a wheelchair. Okay, all set. Power core, safe. Good. Ladies, welcome, Andrew said as he gingerly stepped away from the odd machine. He hobbled towards them and tried to stay steady. Obviously, he was still getting his sea legs. Sorry about the hobbling and such. I'm still getting used to this exo thing. Needs adjusting. Anyway, welcome to your firearms certification test. I have gotten in touch with a buddy of mine, that guy there, he said, gesturing to the human polishing the big machine, to run something both fun and educational, and also legal, which is why he's here. I managed to get permission to borrow one of these for the lesson. He pressed a button on the odd set of armor, and it suddenly released an odd hum of energy. It stood to full height of 8 feet tall, and with a series of clunky mechanical motions stood to attention. The front of its armor plating splayed open like a blooming flower, exposing its insides. Insides that looked strangely comfortable, with leather-lining seat cushions and a cup holder, for some reason. The larger machine also emitted a strange pulse of energy, its reactor starting up. Both machines were colored in a pale blue, with various parts such as steps, legs, and heavy parts painted a bright yellow or light orange. The smaller machine looked like a fancy version of a set of knight's armor, excluding the flamboyant cloak and large kite shield reminiscent of this kind of style. The larger machine looked like a miniaturized version of the AT-AT from Star Wars, only around 20 feet high and looking significantly more advanced, with a dog-like body and legs, looking significantly more agile and articulate than its movie counterpart. This is the IO Polytechnic Series 2 Type 3 Powered Armor Exoskeleton, power armor basically. Today, you're going to learn how to use it in order to earn your advanced armaments certifications. Questions? Andrew asked his class. The girls all looked at each other, concerned, scared, and confused. One girl, Leiliani, a dark elf, raised a hand after a time. Why do we need an advanced armament certification, sir? Good question. Do you have any ambitions to join the fleet, become an independent starship pilot or otherwise? If you do, an advanced armament certification is mandatory if you intend on deploying any kind of spacecraft or advanced aircraft in any capacity. In short, this certification will allow you to use the big guns on starships and other heavy-grade weapons. This will fast-track you to a career in spaceship ownership, Andrew said. The girl's eyes lit up with excitement. One girl, a wood elf named Emery, excitedly raised her hand. You mean if we get this advanced certification thingy, we're going to go to space? She asked. Well, no. But it will mean you have completed step 1 in getting a full pilot's license, and other certifications you need to own or operate a starfaring vessel. This will fast-track progress if you want to be a starship crew member. If you don't want to do that, though, the certification will allow you to engage in various other industries, including jobs in manufacturing, industry, weapons production, mining. There's a lot you can do with an advanced license, including being able to one day pilot that thing, Andrew replied, gesturing to the giant machine nearby. Some girls bit their lower lips or patted their feet excitedly at the concept. The youngest of the group, a short sprite elf, raised her hand. "Yes, Kalia? You have a question?" "Yes, sir." "Where's your wheelchair?" she asked, tilting her head curiously. "Oh, that, I forgot." "Right, this is an exoskeleton," Andrew said and walked to them so they could take a closer look. Andrew's body was covered in some kind of thin metallic skeleton of some kind, almost imperceptible at a distance. It was underneath his clothing, but there was enough of it he could show it off to them. "It's basically the same technology as that powered armor suit, except..." Andrew turned around to show them the cables and wiring poking into the back of his neck. "This one is a sort of semi-implant. I finally got approved to use a prototype earlier this month. But anyway, I'll explain that better later. Time for you to do your work. Hey, Morty, they're good to go," Andrew yelled. The pilot that owned the big one jumped down with a loud thud on the ground and walked up to each girl, shaking her hand with a smile. "Hello there, ladies. My name is Mortimer. I will be your certified instructor for today. Today I will be teaching you how to use the powered exosuit, and more importantly, how to use its advanced suite of weaponry. Your teacher is going to have himself a sit-down, and I'll take over your lesson today," Mortimer said with a chuckle. "I'd forgotten how exhausting it was to walk everywhere," Andrew said as he sat in a chair. "It'll take you a while to get used to it, Corporal. Just don't rest too long. Need to activate those new nerves and blood vessels you got," Mortimer said as Andrew chuckled dismissively. Mortimer brought his students close to the powered suit and showed them how it worked. Kalia, the smallest of the elves, was volunteered for the job of sitting inside it and showing how everything functioned. I wasn't able to get any real approval for one of the more advanced models. Those things are very expensive, so this was the best I could get it short. Notice. "Now, can anybody tell me how it actuates?" Mortimer asked. The girls all looked closely at the machine, past their adorably small classmate, and took careful note of its interior. One girl raised her hand. Does it have something to do with all these dots that are all over the place? Is it something to do with the hexagon pattern?" "Correct. This is a principle we got from an old anime called Appleseed. The very same technology used for animation motion capture is deployed here to move the machine. Each of these dots in the internal hex is a small micro camera. This micro camera feeds the muscle movements into the internal computer, which then turns that into motion. Anybody have any idea how that works?" Mortimer asked as he demonstrated by moving Kalia's arm, which then moved the mech's arm. The girls glanced at each other, then each one took a turn to use poor Kalia as a puppet to try to figure out how it worked. In the end, Kalia herself spoke up. It doesn't look like it's too fast or anything, so I'm guessing that the pilot also wears some kind of undersuit that connects to the thing?" "Correct. Well spotted. Each pilot for these early models also wears an advanced nanosuit that has special things woven into the fabric that better interface with the system, making the cameras more effective at capturing motions from the pilot. It can work without it, but not as effectively. We don't need that for this, so that's why you won't be putting one on. Now, out of there quick. Let me show you how this works," Mortimer asked and gently helped Kalia out of the machine. He hopped in and started explaining how to put it on. "Make sure you are seated properly and comfortable. Make sure feet are in stirrups provided. Now you push this purple button here and..." He pressed the button and the legs, waist, and feet of the machine closed up, encircling his legs and torso. "There. Now put your hands in the control pods here and press the trigger under your left pinky finger. It's this one here," he said, then demonstrated. The armor suit fully closed around him, locking itself in place. "Now, this is the important part. Pay very close attention, okay? If there is an emergency, you yell out, 'Eject!'" he said with a loud shout. The machine immediately popped open and the plating parted, then Mortimer popped out like the machine just acted like a Pez dispenser. Just in case something goes wrong or you feel panicked, just yell eject. The machine will effectively spit you out and you can go running. If you need to get out normally, just push that pinky button and then the purple button again to get out. Everybody got that? Mortimer asked. The girls all nodded their heads in agreement. Good. Now, this is what we're going to be using for the job, Mortimer said as he moved over to the bench and opened a gun case. This is the Barrett M20A2 55mm bolt rifle, the Smith & Wesson Patriot 30mm revolver, and the Kalashnikov KA408 AKDMR platform rifle. You will be using these to earn your certifications. The girls looked a bit scared at the sight of these massive guns, clearly not built for any human without mechanized assistance. They had gone through basic firearms training and even been to a shooting competition before, but never used anything quite like these monsters. Imposing, aren't they? But I want to make this a bit more interesting, Mortimer said, rubbing his hands together in an evil fashion. Morty, don't do anything I ain't allowed to do, Andrew said from his seat. Don't worry, bruh, it's all above board. I have a fun idea. After your courses are complete, we will have a little contest. Winner of the contest gets to use the big gun on the big mech. How's that sound? Mortimer said. The girls were taken by surprise by this suggestion and glanced at each other in surprise. They all jumped, squealing, "Me first," as they crowded around. Mortimer decided to go with alphabetical order, starting with a dark elven girl named Amari. Each girl had to tie her hair down and secure it properly before she could enter, and one by one they got into the suit, faffed about a bit to get used to how the controls worked, and stood up to the firing range. The exercise was less about firing the gun and more about the safety, control, and discipline needed to use the weapon, as well as basic mech controls and operation. Amari stepped up to the firing range and was made to fire a full volley from each gun. Mortimer stood next to her and gestured at the intended target, a bank of sandbags on a hill. Right. So far, so good. Now 5-round mag for the Barrett, 10-round mag for the Kalash, 3 rounds in the cylinder for the revolver. Fire it all. Following safety protocol, of course. Extra points for actually hitting the target, Mortimer said. Yes, sir. Like this. Okay, check sights. Magazine. Loaded. Ready to fire. Check the perimeter. Safety off. She yelled the last part and readied herself to fire. The bulky machine was a bit unwieldy for the elf girl, and it took her a bit to get used to it. She fired off one shot, the blast echoing through the valley and a puff of dust appearing in front of the muzzle. The bullet streaked through the air and blasted into the side of the mountain, 5 or 6 feet from its intended target. Gently now. Take it easy. Panic is dangerous when holding a gun. Remember, discipline, Andrew said as he got back on his feet and stood next to her. Amari put the safety on and took a breath, limbering herself up. She readied herself again and fired another shot. This time, hitting close, just behind the target slightly to the left. You don't have to compensate for the recoil like a normal gun. The machine does it for you, even though it's a higher caliber. Loosen your arms up. Don't twist your wrist to absorb the recoil. Don't forget to check your grip, Andrew said. Yes, sir. It's a bit weird how this thing works, Amari said. I know. It takes some getting used to, but it looks like you have your range. Try again, Mortimer said. Amari readied herself again and fired a shot, this time hitting her target and releasing a puff of dust from the sandbag target. Her friends were unable to celebrate as she quickly released 2 more shots, both of which hit their target. Amari ejected the spent magazine and stood to attention, rifle down at her side. Good. Perfect. Discipline, perfect safety technique. Good shots, too. 3 out of 5. Not bad for a newbie. Now the revolver. 3 rounds, Mortimer said. Amari nodded in response and put the rifle down, picking up the revolver. She loaded it carefully and checked her perimeter to make sure it's clear. She held the revolver with both hands, then cocked it ready to fire. She genuinely didn't think the gun had that much recoil, so it took her by surprise when it tried to kick itself out of her hands. She regained her composure and tried a different stance, using the machine's weight on the gun's handle to absorb the recoil. She fired 2 more shots, one of which hit the target. She ejected the spent casings and put the gun on the table. Very good. Got a bit iffy there at that first one, but you handled it well. Do not be afraid to change stances if you need to. Next, the DMR, Andrew said. She picked up the rather vicious-looking weapon and prepared herself to fire it. Mortimer directed her to lay down and use the bipod on the gun. Okay. Don't have to hit any targets. This one's about control. Fire at full auto and we'll see how you handle it, Mortimer said. Amari nodded and lay down, using the concrete platform they're standing on to stabilize herself. She readied herself, checked her quarters, and made sure it was safe, then unleashed. 2 seconds later, the mag was expended and she was gasping for breath from the shock. She stood up, put the gun down, then let herself shiver a bit as she came, down from the adrenaline high. Very good. Amari made a good baseline. Let's see who can do better. The one who gets the most hits wins and gets to play with the big mech. So far the score is 3-1-1. Let's do better, Mortimer said. The rest of the class all took their turn, with the shocking outcome of the sprite elf Kalia coming out on top with a score of 4-3-6. Kalia was more than just a little intimidated at the sight of the gigantic beast as Mortimer lowered the access ladder to the cockpit. Andrew went up with her to act as supervisor as Mortimer put her in the gunner's seat. Holy crap, this is fancy, she squeaked as she put her seatbelt on. It is, isn't it? Military versions are a lot more complex than this one. This one is a civilian-grade variant for sporting contests. Military versions are also a lot more heavily armed than Binky here, Mortimer said. Andrew and Kalia both looked at him with a crooked brow. Binky? Yeah, that's his name. So let me get into a good spot and you can see what he does, Mortimer replied. The machine reared up to full height, moving around exactly like a dog as its enormous steel feet slammed into the sand, and Mortimer expertly moved it into position in front of the firing target. Mortimer then showed Kalia how to aim. The entire head of the machine moved as it did, just like the head of a dog. We had an idea for something like this back in the late 1980s, from a movie series called Star Wars. It was called the AT-AT, All-Terrain Armored Transport. Damn beautiful beast, good concept, but the movie version was too big, fat, and clunky to be of any real use in combat. So we instead took inspiration from DARPA and Cambridge robotics programs. Same principle, different deployment. The entire head acts as a turret because of the whole design of the doggo. It's very articulate, Mortimer said as he demonstrated its operation. Okay, wait. If this thing is so good, why do you use tanks and planes and stuff like from back in the 20th century? If you got these, why do you still have tanks in service? She asked. Simple kitten. A standard Army MBT costs around $1.2 million to build and maintain with a combat life of 30 to 50 years in service. This magnificent beast has a price tag of $30 million and a service life of maybe 20 years, Andrew replied with a smirk. The number made her jaw drop and she nearly choked on her own shock. Uh-huh. Yes. Specialized equipment like this is made for special operations or as a support vessel for less expensive, more numerous military operations. We don't deploy 100 of these things on the front line, in any case. Here's what he's packing. A 240mm cannon, a twin-linked plasma bolter, and one 8-barrel minigun. I'll let you spend a full mag on each and 10 seconds on the minigun, because ammo is pricey for this thing. Can't let you have too much fun, can we? Mortimer said and readied the machine to firing position. Oh, okay. So, if I can see, this right. Hold the joystick with your right hand to aim. Press buttons on the trigger to fire. Use that heads-up display screen thing to look what I'm shooting at. Right? The two men nodded in approval, and Mortimer made sure to have his own hand on a secondary targeting system to make sure she didn't do anything silly or crazy. Kalia fiddled with it to see if she could figure it out and eventually got used to the motion of the head. She lined up the targeting reticule on the sandbag target they'd been shooting at. Okay, I'm assuming no matter how big the gun, the procedures are the same. Ready to fire, check the perimeter, clear area, safety off. She yelled the last words and gently squeezed the trigger. The main cannon fired a high explosive shell, the ground shuddering from the explosion. The whole body of the machine wrenched back to absorb the recoil. The shell screamed through the air and hit just to the left of the target, blowing a huge crater into the side of the hill and displacing some of the sandbags. Kalia was allowed to fire 2 more shells, completely obliterating the target into piles of shredded material and dust plumes. That was awesome! She growled excitedly. They held her back and calmed her down before the next one. She took some breaths and collected herself, then moved to the plasma bolters. Lacking any target owing to her previous attack, decided to fire. Into the crater she left behind to make a bigger hole. The blasters sounded exactly like the AT-AT's blasters, but left their impact points as blazing piles of molten glassy goop. She fired a few volleys of blaster bolts, turning the hillside into a strange mass of swirling semi-molten glass. Once again, her instructors had to calm her down before she went for the Gatling gun. She aimed at her target, the molten glass, goop, and produced 3 bursts of fire, 3 solid beams of molten metal bullets at 5 seconds each, that turned the molten goop into a strange form of semi-hardened art. Kalia could barely contain her excitement at how much fun it was, and her teacher Andrew decided to cut the rest of the fun off before she ended up getting too excited and getting either herself or someone else hurt. Each girl earned her certification, plus some extra credit to boast about at school. Thanks for diving into this story with me. Don't miss out on the next one. Hit that subscribe button, give this video a big thumbs up, and drop a comment below with your thoughts. I'd love to hear what you think.